My phone suddenly received a message. Welcome aboard bus number 44. Please observe the following rules. Rule 1. This bus makes a total of 5 stops. You must, and may only, get off at the last stop. Rule 2. Don't eat anything anyone gives you. Rule 3. Don't refuse any request made by a person wearing red. Rule 4. If there's truly no other option, you can ask the driver for help, but it comes at a great cost. Rule 5. Trust no one. Rule 6. If you hear strange noises, don't look. It's best to close your eyes tight. Rule 7. Don't let anyone know who you are, or you'll die. I rubbed my temples. A dull ache pulsed through my head. Being a wage earner isn't easy. Our department took on a big project a few days ago. The manager had us working overtime every day, and tonight we didn't finish until 11 o'clock. The city I'm in is well beyond the 4th tier, and our company is out in the suburbs, so at this hour it's hard to hail a cab. And overtime pay isn't easy to come by. Thankfully, there's a bus stop not far from the company building, so when we work late we sometimes take the bus home. The late bus has its advantages: fewer people, peace, and quiet. I meant to use the time to listen to music and unwind, but didn't expect to receive a prank text like that. Lily, look, how bored have people become these days? I nudged the girl beside me and complained indignantly. Lily and I worked in the same department. The two of us rented rooms not far from each other, so after overtime, we often rode home together. We were pretty close. What did you say? Lily pulled her gaze back from the window and turned to look at me. There was a slight hollowness in her eyes. A sudden, intense sense of wrongness washed over me. Usually Lily chatters away on the bus, but today she was unusually quiet. Maybe she was just tired from overtime, I thought, and froze for a moment as I grabbed my phone to show her the ridiculously dull text message. As I turned, it hit me that something was off. When Lily had turned to face me just now, her head had moved in a perfectly straight, mechanical way. That straightness didn't look at all like a person turning their head. It was like the toy we had as kids, the way you twist its head with your hand. I looked at her neck. Because of the shawl of hair, I hadn't noticed before, but at the base of her throat there seemed to be a pale line. The line didn't look like any kind of jewelry. It looked more as if her neck had been glued on. A chill ran through me, and my phone froze in midair, but Lily had already leaned in. The corners of her mouth stretched into an exaggerated arc, revealing a grotesque smile. I reflexively hit the phone off. The screen went black. What were you about to show me? Lily asked softly. I suddenly remembered the message from earlier. Rule 7. Don't let anyone know who you are, or you'll die. If she saw the text on my phone, would that count as exposing who I am? I looked at Lily, a chill running across my scalp. Right now, she was nothing like her usual buoyant, lively self. Her eyes looked hollow and numb. Oh, it's nothing. I saw some performance artists online. The things they do are really boring. I forced a smile. Lily let out a disappointed, "Oh," and turned her head back to the window. I studied Lily with my peripheral vision. A silhouette I knew well felt strangely unfamiliar now. The back of her neck was completely hidden by her hair, nothing visible at all. But the odd feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. I remembered the text message from a moment ago and couldn't help glancing around. And sure enough, I noticed something different. I remembered the bus used to be painted blue inside, warm and comforting to look at. Today the interior was all white, a blinding expanse that made my skin crawl. That's wildly unlucky. Buses don't usually have interiors in that color, unless it's a hearse. Besides, even though it was close to dawn, the silence inside the bus was excessive. Aside from bursts of dogs barking outside, almost no one made sound. Keep in mind, there was still a handful of people scattered around the bus. With that in mind, I began to scrutinize the passengers one by one. Besides the driver, there were only 6 other people on the bus. Lily and I sat in a row behind the rear door. A young couple who looked like lovers sat in the seat behind the driver. Both had dyed red hair and were huddled together, intently watching a phone. To the right rear of that couple sat a man wearing a baseball cap, leaning against the seat as if resting. In the row to the left front of Lily and me sat a woman in a red dress, curled up at her seat, doing something I couldn't tell. An old woman and a little boy were sitting in the very last row of the bus. When I turned my head, The old woman was stroking the boy's hair. Everything looked normal, yet a persistent sense of dread clung to me and wouldn't go away. Just as I turned, the little boy who had been sitting on the old woman's lap suddenly jumped off her and walked straight toward the front. The light had been too dim before. Only when the boy drew near did I finally make out his face. He looked about 4 or 5 years old, his skin fair, 2 little buns on his head, rosy cheeks, cute in an endearing way. When he came up beside me, he suddenly stopped, somehow produced a skewer of candied hawthorn from behind him, held it out in front of me, and asked in a crisp voice, "Big sister, do you want some candied hawthorn?" I was still steeped in panic. There was no mood to eat candied hawthorn. I could only force a smile and shake my head. But he still didn't seem willing to give up. He kept holding the candied hawthorn up to my mouth. "Sis, this candied hawthorn is really delicious. How could you possibly not love it?" His voice suddenly grew urgent. His normally pale skin turned even whiter, and the blush on his face deepened to a bright red. My mind jolted. In that moment, he looked exactly like the porcelain doll sold in craft shops. I lowered my head to look at the candied hawthorn, and goose flesh prickled all over me. A moment ago, they were hawthorn berries glazed in sugar. Now they had turned into eyeballs dripping black water. Terrified, my body began to tremble uncontrollably, and I suddenly remembered that text message. Rule 2. Don't eat anything anyone gives you. The little boy showed no sign of letting me go. He stared at me with unblinking eyes, and the words that came out of his mouth sent me plunging into an ice pit. "Sis, you don't dare eat. You're different from us, aren't you?" After saying that, he looked at me with a resentful, poisonous gaze, and his 2 little hands reached out toward me. In a flash, I remembered another rule from the text message. Rule 7. Don't let anyone know who you are, or you'll die. To them, this eyeball might well be a delicacy. Refusing to eat it would certainly arouse their suspicion. Either I swallowed the eyeball despite my disgust, or I exposed myself and faced certain death. It seemed there really was no choice before me. Just as I was steeling myself to bite into the eyeball, a faint voice suddenly reached my ear. "Kid, forcing someone to eat something isn't a good habit, you know, especially forcing a girl to eat sweets." Lily beside me had somehow turned her head back and, expressionless, said, her words seemed to have a kind of magic. The snarling little demon instantly quieted, silently retracting the candied hawthorn and hopping back to its seat. I forced myself to hold back my fear and watched the little demon slowly walk away. After it returned to its seat, it seemed to be sulking at the old woman, who rubbed its hair with her wrinkled hand, trying to soothe it. It grabbed the old woman's hand and began gnawing with its teeth. In a short while, the flesh on one finger had been eaten clean away, revealing the white knuckle beneath, accompanied by a crunch-crunch sound. Suddenly, it seemed to sense something, raised its head and looked at me, its mouth stretched into an exaggerated arc, giving me a grotesque grin. I hurriedly averted my eyes and looked toward Lily beside me, but she was staring out the window. I quickly fished out my phone. This bus was far too eerie, reminding me of scenes from the supernatural novels I'd read. I was both disappointed and not surprised to see my phone showing no signal. I followed Lily's gaze and looked outside, only to find everything smothered in a gray haze, as if a fog had been draped over the place. I could barely make out some low houses and small mounds of earth. This wasn't right. I remembered tall buildings along the way home. Where did all these single-story houses come from? It looked like the 70s or 80s. Besides, this city sits on a plain. There isn't a single mountain within the urban area. All the signs made me increasingly convinced that there was something wrong with this bus. Maybe sensing my stare, Lily slowly turned around, leaned close to my ear, and in a voice meant only for the 2 of us, whispered, "We're the only ones like this here. Don't let them know. Don't look at anything. Don't say anything. Don't interfere. Once we reach the terminus, we can return to the normal world." I opened my eyes wide and stared at Lily in shock. She joined the company last year and was assigned to our department when she arrived. I was the one who trained her, getting her familiar with the role and the work. Ordinarily, she was a shy, lively girl. If everything she said was true, why did she seem so calm? Was she still the Lily I knew? Do you know something? I stared into her eyes. I don't know anything else. Believe or not, it's up to you, Lily replied calmly. After that, no matter how much I questioned her, she said nothing. Ding! Jinji Mountain has arrived. Please alight through the rear door. Be careful when opening the door. Jinji Mountain? There isn't a stop like that on the way home at all. Although I had braced myself, the announcement that we'd reached a stop still left me inexplicably puzzled. With a soft PFF, the rear door suddenly opened, and fresh air rushed in from outside. No matter how stifling the interior of the bus was, I still held back the urge to bolt out because by now I pretty much believed the content of the text message. Rule 1. This bus has a total of 5 stops. You must, and may only, get off at the last stop. That one boxed me in. Under no circumstances could I disembark early. After the rear door opened, I peered out through the exit, curiously taking in the scene beyond. Outside, it seemed a mountain lay swallowed by the darkness. Only the faint outline suggested the shape of a rooster. I'd lived in this city for 7 or 8 years, but I couldn't for the life of me recall any peak like that. My mind went back to the stop name announced earlier. What on earth was Jinji Mountain? The vehicle is starting. Please hold on and sit steady. Next stop, Ghost Village. Since I had to get off at the 5th stop, I kept my attention fixed on the station announcements. When I heard the stop name, my heart grew even heavier. Jinji Mountain still sounded like a normal station name, but what on earth was Wild Ghost Village? Could it be that the next stop was where wild ghosts lived? Hood, hood, hood. Heavy footsteps came from the front door, and a fat man with a face full of coarse flesh boarded the bus. He squinted. He looked to be in his 40s. From the moment he boarded, he was unsteady, swaying as if drunk. As he passed the couple sitting behind the driver, he stumbled and fell straight between them. With a bang, he almost sent the couple, who had been staring at their phone, toppling over. The young man seemed furious. He stood up to argue with the fat man, while the young woman chimed in beside him. The fat man shoved the young man hard. The young man looked thin and went down to the floor at once. The young man looked furious. After scrambling to his feet and steadying himself, one hand suddenly jabbed at the fat man. My limbs went cold witnessing it all, because just then the young man's hand abruptly turned into a black, needle-like appendage, like the antenna of some insect. The black tentacle drove hard into the fat man's body, but he seemed not to feel any pain. Instead, a strange smile crossed his face. Then he opened his mouth wide and bit down on the young man's head. Though not a large mouth, it sheared off half his skull in a single bite. White brain matter mixed with black fluid ran down the corner of the fat man's mouth. The young woman beside me seemed to have been scared senseless, collapsing to the ground and lying there motionless. The fat man walked over slowly, bit through the young woman's head in one gulp, then dragged the 2 bodies onto the seats. Creak, creak, the sounds of feeding kept coming from ahead. Even stranger, everyone on the bus seemed deaf and mute. Neither the driver nor the passengers so much as turned their heads. About 5 minutes later, the fat man had finished devouring everything. Only some tattered clothes and a puddle of black liquid remained on the floor. It seemed the food had been a bit too hot. The fat man took off his coat, then staggered to his feet and looked toward the back row. I ducked down, hiding behind the seat, scanning him with the corner of my eye, nearly screaming in terror. The fat man, stripped of his outerwear, was layered in rolls of fat, and even more nauseating. On his belly, more than 10 pairs of eyes had grown, all fixed on me with blood-red irises. Don't make a sound. It might be looking for something to feed on, unless you want to become one of its eyes. Lily kept staring out the window and said in a low voice. I held my breath, not daring to make a single sound for fear of drawing its attention. Fortunately, it seemed to have eaten its fill earlier. It slowly sat down again, and before long the sound of snoring came. The bus continued forward at a slow pace, and I didn't press Lily for answers. She wouldn't tell me anything anyway. Judging from what had just happened, this bus could not exist in the real world. I even suspected it was a bus running in the underworld. Thinking that, I took out my phone again and reread the text message I had received. Maybe if I followed that rule, I could survive. Suddenly a strange sound came from the front, like something being torn. I was just about to see what was happening when a jolt ran through my mind. Rule 6. If you hear strange noises, don't look. It's best to close your eyes tight. I forced down my curiosity and quickly shut my eyes, following the text message's instructions. The sudden darkness was terrifying, and when that fear comes from the unknown, it makes your chest feel tight with panic. Luckily, the sound didn't last long. The moment it stopped, I immediately opened my eyes. The instant I opened them, the zzz noise suddenly started again. I glanced instinctively, and my heart leapt into my throat. The man in the baseball cap sitting behind the fat man had just taken off his cap and was peeling a thin film, complete with a nose and eyes, off his face. I shouted, "This is bad," in my head, unsure if he'd noticed me, and hastily shut my eyes again. The sizzling sound stopped. The clattering footsteps began. I squeezed my eyes shut, afraid I might accidentally see something I shouldn't, but the footsteps drew nearer and nearer. "You saw me," a voice like a mechanically synthesized tone whispered in my ear. A cold hand landed on my shoulder and pressed down hard, sending a sharp burst of pain through me. Since I'd already been discovered, I had no choice but to open my eyes again. As I feared, the man in the baseball cap was indeed standing in front of me. What chilled me even more was that his face beneath the cap had no features at all. He must have been tearing his own face off just moments ago. The man, his secret exposed, seemed furious. A searing pain drilled into my shoulder. When I looked up, I saw black, long nails suddenly sprouting from his fingers. All 5 had already sunk into my shoulder. Lily remained outwardly calm, staring out the window. Hoping she'd save me seemed hopeless. I scrambled off the seat, tumbling and crawling as I fled forward. By the time I reached the woman in the red dress, the faceless man had already caught up. He spread his arms and lunged at me with brutal force. With nowhere left to run, I decided to risk it all and threw myself straight onto the red dress seat. The faceless man, overexerting himself, stared at me intently as his 10 black fingernails plunged into the woman in the red dress. The red dress screamed a terrifying shriek when it was stabbed. Her hair, which had originally just reached her waist, grew in the wind, at least 5 times longer, and instantly wound itself around the faceless man's limbs. Using that moment, I took a look at the red dress. Her bangs were very long, covering her eyes and nose. The only visible feature was her mouth, painted with an extremely vivid lipstick. What was truly frightening was that when she stood up, I realized there was nothing beneath the red dress. She was floating as she walked. The faceless man kept tearing at the thick mass of hair, but the red dress's hair grew far faster than he could rip. In no time, the black hair had formed a cocoon-like thing, wrapping the faceless man entirely inside. Faceless man struggled desperately inside the cicada pupa, but the hair's resilience was extreme. After a few minutes, his struggles grew weaker and finally ceased, and thin wisps of black air seeped from the pupa's seams. The dozen-meter-long hair slowly shortened and returned to the red dress's head. I gently patted my chest and let out a breath. It seemed the ghosts in the car weren't acting together. This was already their second fight. Just as I was calming down, a cold, chilling presence fixed on me. I looked up. The woman in the red dress was already standing in front of me. "Would you dance with me?" There was no expression at all in the eyes peeking out from the thick hair. The red dress was as bright as blood. Maybe because I had thrown myself on her earlier, she had finally singled me out. When she saw I didn't react at all, her voice grew even sharper. "Why won't any of you dance with me? You're all going to die." I clenched my teeth against the stabbing pain in my shoulder and hurriedly leapt up from my seat. By then, fear and pain had drenched me in sweat. Seeing that I was willing to dance with her, the red dress calmed down. She stood perfectly still, arms hanging at her sides, and nodded slightly, as if signaling to me. She stood on one leg, the other stretched straight back as she began to perform, her eyes fixed on me as if judging whether I was taking the dance seriously. From that pose, it was obviously the world-famous ballet piece, Swan Dance. When I was little, my parents once made me take dance lessons to improve my posture, but I studied Chinese dance, not ballet. Luckily, my flexibility was still there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to pull off those complicated moves at all. Arabesque, in point with shoulders, whip turn. I clenched through the pain and forced every move into place, my facial muscles even starting to twitch, sweat soaking my whole body and sticking to me. I knew perfectly well the prize for dancing badly was death. But the red dress didn't seem to demand perfection. As long as it was roughly right, that was enough. When the piece finally ended, the red dress nodded at me with satisfaction and returned to her seat. I collapsed like a lump of soggy clay, utterly spent. The bus slowed down gradually, and the clear stop announcement suddenly sounded, repeatedly pricking my nerves. Ding! Yigue Village. Please exit through the rear door and be careful when disembarking. The man in front had his shoulder stabbed by the faceless man, and the searing pain showed no sign of letting up. On top of that, having just leapt into a ballet, my strength was basically spent, my vision darkened, and my consciousness grew hazy. In that half-dazed state, I heard an extremely loud sound. Through the blur, I could make out calls of vendors hawking and haggling, the voices of lovers arguing, the sounds of children playing. I wondered if my hearing had gone wrong and forced my eyes wide open to look out the window. Outside, the lights were bright, as if a pedestrian street beside a university town in the city had come to life. Countless stalls calling out a variety of foods and goods, and people wandering between them. Inside and outside the bus felt like two different worlds. For a moment, I even forgot my own situation. Just as the doors had barely opened, the tat-tat-tat of footsteps sounded again. I kept my head down behind the seat and stole a glance out of the corner of my eye, and it nearly made me doubt my own vision, because stepping on through the front door were two men dressed in police uniforms. Government inspection. After the two men climbed aboard, they shouted coldly and began to patrol the bus. The driver showed no reaction at all, remaining calmly seated at the wheel. An absurd scene unfolded inside the bus. Two men in ancient official robes conducting an inspection on a modern city bus. Their inspection targets weren't even human. The two policemen were surprisingly professional, scrutinizing each person carefully, making a big show of it. Stranger still, whether it was the fat man or the red dress, when faced with the officer's inspection, they showed absolutely no reaction. If I hadn't seen how they looked a moment ago, I would have almost taken them for law-abiding citizens. And these two policemen, strangely, couldn't find anything wrong with those monsters. After checking the ones in front of me, they came straight toward me. The two police officers scrutinized me from head to toe. One of them stepped up in front of me and, in a low voice, said something that made me hold my breath. "This bus is trouble. Get off with us now." The two officers were of different heights. The shorter one hovered by my side, urging me quietly. "The final stop of this bus is hell. Your allotted years aren't up yet. Why aren't you coming with us?" But the more they urged me to get off, the more question marks filled my head. These two policemen had arrived so abruptly. Even the driver and the other passengers treated them oddly. It felt to me as if they were a little afraid of the two officers. What kind of good sort could frighten even ghosts and monsters? The name of this stop chilled me as well. If ghosts from Yegu Village board here, might they be wild spirits too? Besides, the text message had told me plainly, don't trust anyone. Having convinced myself of that, I pretended not to hear anything and stayed seated. Seeing I still refused to stand, the tall cop grew anxious and yanked at my clothes, trying to haul me up. I clung to the seat rail with all my might and refused to move. The short cop stopped talking to me and instead desperately pried at the hands that gripped the rail. I already had little strength left. Both my arms were quickly wrenched apart, and the two policemen dragged me toward the rear door. "Vehicle starting. Please hold steady and sit down." Next stop, the Hall of Bewilderment. The crisp station announcement sounded. The two policemen suddenly halted, and the grip on my hands immediately relaxed. Then, before the back door closed, they ran out like people fleeing for their lives. I dragged my nearly falling apart body back into the seat and turned to look at Lily. She still stared out the window, as ever unchanging, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Outside the window, Two policemen looked at me with greedy, ravenous eyes, like predators eyeing tempting prey. Congratulations, you survived. Lily's calm voice sounded in my ear again. She's always like that. When you want to ask her something, she keeps silent. When you don't want to ask, she suddenly speaks. The two policemen just now weren't real. They were manifestations of passengers who hadn't disembarked in previous stops. At this stop, they'll confuse others into getting off and ultimately become part of them. The passengers from before? Where exactly is this bus headed? And why are we on it? I voiced the question that had been gnawing at me. Where are we going? You should have known that already. As for why you're on the bus, I don't know either. Lily didn't answer me directly, but she was right. A suspicion had already been forming in my mind. This was a bus bound for the netherworld, and the passengers on it were very likely departed souls. Could it be that my allotted lifespan had run out too? But why was I different from them? What's different about you is that you can get off the bus. We can't. As if she knew what I was thinking, Lily gave me a long, deep look. Why can I get off? Why can't you? My doubts only grew. Don't ask too many questions. Sometimes knowing more isn't a good thing. A strange expression crossed Lily's face, as if she were recalling something. She soon pulled herself together and took out a bottle of mineral water. Thank you. After all that fussing, I hadn't noticed how much I'd sweat. My whole body felt nearly dehydrated. I unscrewed the cap and began gulping the water down. Before long, the bottle was empty. Through the clear cap, I saw a chill smile spread across Lily's face. Ding! Mahundian has arrived. Please disembark through the rear door. Please be careful when opening the door. When a stop announcement sounded, a sudden wave of dizziness hit my head. My feet felt like they were walking on cotton, my head as if filled with lead. The scene before me suddenly began to warp, slowly becoming the image of my childhood home. The table piled high with good dishes, my parents sitting by the table waiting for me. My eyes grew wet. I had left home to work in this city nearly 10 years ago, and for those 10 years my parents' faces had only appeared on my phone screen. Right? I was supposed to be on a bus. There were things I shouldn't do, but at this moment my head wouldn't obey me at all. Driver, please, help me. I gave a muffled, mosquito-like sound before my last shred of reason vanished. I staggered to my feet and walked toward the countless scenes from my dreams. Mom, wearing an apron, gave me a warm, tender smile. Dad still pretended to keep a stern face, but the corners of his eyes were already crinkling. This stop. Does anyone get off here or not? If no one's getting off, I'm driving on. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded. The scene before me abruptly began to shatter. The homestead broke into fragments. By the time I came to, one foot was already on the back step, 2 lines of tears still streaking my cheek. I snatched my foot back, and with a thud the rear door slammed shut. If not for that hoarse voice, I would have stepped off the bus by now. Outside the bus was darkness, and in that darkness vague figures stirred. If I went down there, I suppose I would become one of them. The vehicle is departing. Please hold on to steady yourself. Next stop, Fengdu City. At this moment, that announced stop name somehow gave me a sense of safety. Rule 2. Don't eat anything anyone gives you. After all, Lily was an acquaintance and had once saved me. Coupled with her repeated warnings, my guard toward her dropped to its lowest. I even forgot the rule. In a broad sense, bottled water also counts as food. When I sat down, the seat next to me was already empty. Lily was gone. Didn't she say I was the only one allowed to get off? So where did she go? Or perhaps she was one of them from the start, and the earlier warnings and help were just a performance. Rule 4. If there's truly no other option, you can ask the driver for help, but it comes at a great cost. It was fortunate that this rule existed. It saved my life at the most dangerous moment. I just didn't know what price I had paid. I checked my limbs. None were missing. My eyes could see, my ears could hear. In an environment like this, surviving was already no small feat, and I had no inclination to probe what the cost might actually be. Moreover, unlike before, I recognized the name of this stop. Fengdu City, said to be the underworld, the realm of the dead, where people go after they die. It had another name as well, the Ghost City. I remember the first stop was Jinji Mountain, the second was Wild Ghost Village, The third was the Maze Hall, and Fengdu City was the fourth stop. So what will the final stop be? Having encountered so many strange things, my mental endurance has been stretched to the breaking point. By now, the feeling of fear has dropped to its lowest ebb, and the other passengers left on the bus seem to have fallen into a silence. Even the noisiest fat guy from before now sat quietly in his seat, not making a sound. Outside the bus window, the shapes were still shadowy, but the previously gray sky had brightened a little, flushing with a faint pink. The second-to-last stop was coming up. I closed my eyes and lay back in my seat to nap, try to recover some strength for the final stop. Everything that had happened so far proved that as long as I followed the rules in the text messages, there would be a slim chance of survival. Now I believed the messages without question. Ding! Fengdu City has arrived. Please cooperate by exiting through the rear door. Be careful when opening the door. Outside the window, a thick red mist now blanketed everything. Nothing could be seen. Knock, knock, knock. A person in a black trench coat boarded through the front door. It looked short, but walked hurriedly. The black coat covered the whole body, even a hood over the head, making its features indistinguishable. After getting on, though there were clearly many empty seats, it strode straight toward me. Stopping in front of me, it did not sit down, but leaned close and in a hoarse voice whispered to me, "Nan Nan, get off the bus. This is your last stop. If you go any further, you won't live." My head felt as if it had been struck hard by a hammer. Only my family ever called me Nan Nan. It tugged up the hood of the trench coat. Beneath the hood was a face all creased with wrinkles, and in that instant of urgency the features were all compressed together. Yet it filled me with an unimaginable warmth. Granny. I've known this face all too well. Because of my parents' work, I was raised by my grandmother until I started school, falling asleep every night to that gentle visage. No, this can't be. How can my grandmother be here? It must be one of them, taking her form. The next stop is the last one. This is their final chance. Thinking that through, I gradually calmed, staring coldly at it without a word. Seeing that I showed no reaction, it grew more frantic, urgently trying to persuade me. Nanny, you can only ride for 5 stops. The first stop is Evil Dog Ridge, the second is Golden Rooster Mountain, the third is Wild Ghost Village, the fourth is the Bewildering Hall, and the fifth and final stop is Fengdu City. One stop beyond, that is the 18 levels of hell. It wore an expression of terror. Suddenly it hit me. When I first woke up on the bus, I had indeed heard waves of barking. Could it be that these so-called 5 stops include the first stop where I boarded? Nan Nan, do you remember the song Grandma used to sing to you when you were little and scared at night? Baby, go to sleep. The little wind blows softly. The bird calls low. The dog runs slowly. The kitten giggles secretly. The house is quiet. Baby, go to sleep. A hoarse yet gentle voice rose up, bringing me a powerful sense of familiarity. I had no more doubts. I hastily got up and followed Grandma toward the back door. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared at the rear door, and the driver, who had been sitting in the driver's seat, moved to block the back exit. This stop is not allowed to get off. Everyone must get off at the next stop. He stuck out a long tongue and said expressionlessly. Grandma seemed to have expected he'd try to stop us. She let out a sharp, piercing shriek and barreled forward, taking me with her. Caught off guard, the driver was shoved aside just enough to leave a gap. His face changed. Before I knew it, he produced 2 iron chains from somewhere and snapped them onto mine and Grandma's legs. The sting made my grandmother and me buckle at the knees. We fell to our knees by the rear door, while the driver flashed a feral grin and yanked us back with the iron chains. Grandmother, fury in her eyes, summoned the last of her strength to rip the chain off my leg, tearing flesh and blood from me. Then, with a powerful shove, she sent me rolling out of the bus. The last image I saw was Grandmother being yanked back into the bus by the chain. The last sound I heard was, "The vehicle is departing. Please hold steady and sit tight." Next stop, the 18th level of hell. It felt as if I'd been dreaming for a very, very long time. When I finally woke up, I found myself lying on a hospital bed. Seeing my eyes open, the elderly couple were so overjoyed they were left speechless. They stammered and chattered for 10 or 15 minutes before I learned what had happened during that time. That night, the bus I was on collided with a big truck as it passed through an intersection. After the vehicle overturned, everyone on board died instantly except me. I wasn't much better off. I became a vegetable with no consciousness for nearly a week. A couple of days ago, my grandmother rushed over from the countryside to see me. By then, my brain waves had already dropped to low frequency, and the hospital had issued a critical condition notice. My mother told me that Grandma stubbornly stayed with me day and night, singing a nursery rhyme in my ear every day. A miracle happened. A day later, my brain waves returned to normal. But Grandma, overwhelmed by grief and already very old, died the day before I woke up. For nearly a month afterward, I didn't say a single word. Others thought I was merely shaken to the core. Only I knew that a single bus kept circling in my mind, unable to leave. I pored over countless sources and at last understood the meaning behind each station name. Gradually, I began to let go. No matter how deep the sorrow, I would still live my life well, because I carry two people's lives on my shoulders. Another month later, I came to visit Grandma again. She lived in a short little headstone now, but in the photograph she still looked so peaceful. Suddenly a gust of wind blew, and a dizzy spell hit my head with shocking suddenness. I fainted again. When I came to, my head still throbbed the same. I was lying on a stained bed, surrounded by 7 odd little dwarves. What a beautiful little girl. How shall we eat her? Deep fried is delicious, fragrant, and crispy. Or chop it up into meatballs, then you can eat it for a long time. Their drool even dripped onto my face. The long-sealed memory suddenly reopened. Rule 4. If there's truly no other option, you can ask the driver for help, but it comes at a great cost. Maybe this is the price I must pay.